Welcome back. You're watching Storyboard. The pandemic has brought about consumer behavior that is here to stay. So, how can communication and strategy change to cater to the changed consumer landscape? And how can strategy play a role in bringing about creative effectiveness? We are getting these questions answered from Amit Kekre, National Strategy Head, DDB Mudra Group. Listen in.
Hi Amit, welcome to CNBC TV 18. Many thanks for joining us.
Hi Ankita, lovely to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Amit, you've come out with a new ebook called Point of New. It's a point of view on the new normal that has resulted from a worldwide pandemic that has impacted lives, businesses, and most importantly, consumer behavior. Tell us about the key themes for Point of New and how did you conceptualize this?
Sure, Ankita. I think the name of the ebook Point of New kind of is indicative of what may have given birth to it. But let me elaborate a little bit. The time that we are in, this particular time that we are in, in history, that deliberation is important because, as you know, that the pandemic, the reach and the impact that it has had on everyone, especially on consumer psyche, it has forced certain questions, right? That will it be back to the way things were, or it'll be a completely new future? Will we, for instance, celebrate the newfound freedom, or we'll learn to enjoy the kind of solitude that it has literally forced upon us? After the pandemic, will we come out and consume even more than we were consuming, or will we perhaps learn to live with less, or will we sort of enjoy the virtue of essentialism, so to speak? And I think the answers to all these questions needed a careful interrogation of, what were the shifts that were going to create the future? Which of those shifts would be shifts that are good for brands, that are good for businesses, and most importantly, that are good for the human race, for humanity at large? And this kind of introspection, contemplation is what led to the creation of the Point of New.
Amit, we're coming out of a very difficult time. There was a time when brands were holding back their ad spends because the products were not on the shelves due to disruption in supply or distribution chain, etc. Their revenues were impacted massively. Going forward also, it would be safe to say that, brands will spend cautiously. In a situation like this, how can brands maximize their reach and their recall value?
I mean, this is a burning question that everybody sort of wants answered, right? And I think at least my view on this is that if you look at the precedent that we have, or previous events and what they've sort of taught us, then we know that previous events have showed a fairly elastic economic behavior. Whether it's SARS, for instance, or what we saw during the MERS pandemic or Fukushima disaster, all these epidemics or disasters have sort of demonstrated that their impact mostly is short term, and that there is a certain elasticity to demand. And what we've seen is that strong brands that continuously or could keep on continuing to invest in building themselves, whether in times of crisis and especially immediately after crisis, they recover much faster and they recover much, much stronger. And we saw this after the 2008 crisis as well, where salient brands grew much faster, right? And saliency is an important factor. Saliency plays a crucial role, if you will, in brand equity and decision making. And I believe brands will sort of, especially brands that are strong brands and that have the ambition to grow, will keep on spending to increase their salience. And I think as far as the question of recall is concerned, Ankita, I think this is the time when both consumers and marketers have realized that it's important for brands to do more of what they're saying and not just sort of say. I think the pandemic has brought in an urgency to prove what brands really mean by their purpose statements, for instance. I think the brands of tomorrow will need to be far more accountable. And the second aspect of recall is, of course, how brands will sort of approach media and what kind of mediums will they choose, in which I firmly believe that, the kind of importance that digital as a medium had found even before the pandemic. It will only sort of find even more momentum, and to get the kind of reach and recall that the changing business environment of today really demands. Brands will need to have a balance of digital media as well as sort of, the conventional media cover that goes hand in hand.
Right, Amit, you mentioned how the impact of these pandemics is short-lived, but we cannot deny the fact that the changes in the consumer behavior that this pandemic has brought about are here to stay, at least for a year or two. What role will strategy play in ensuring creative effectiveness, and how will your communication and strategy change to cater to this changed consumer landscape?
If at all there's one rule that the pandemic has taught us or has written, which supersedes all other rules, it is that everything is dynamic, everything is uncertain. Yeah, that every day is a new day, and every day there are new rules being written. And I think it's also given people an inexplicable amount of comfort with uncertainty. I think one of the most important tasks that brands have in this context is to embrace fluidity, is to embrace flexibility. Gone are the days of fixed business models or fixed delivery models or cast in stone brand ideas, if you will. I think tomorrow's brands and brand ideas will need to be far more open-ended. They'll need to be designed in a way that they represent a certain sort of ethos and ideal, but at the same time they're flexible enough to be adjusted to not just a wide expanse of consumers, but also the dynamically changing audience expectations. And which is where, once again, digital as a medium, what it offers, but also how people behave because they're aided by a digital ecosystem, will need to be harnessed. We are going to have to sort of, really harness the power of data-enabled consumer journeys that capture how people are feeling in their ever-changing context. You're living in a time and age where one person is experiencing two different brands or three different brands in the same category, and that person is at different stages of the brand experience. And marketers that make the best use of what digital as a medium has to offer to really capitalize on that will, I think, win the game.
Amit, finally, take us through your favorite pieces of work that you came out with during the lockdown and that has worked best for you and for your clients in terms of reach and ROI.
From a reach perspective, I think I'd love to sort of talk about some pieces of work that I believe have had a significant impact on culture and how people feel about those brands. I think one of the early campaigns that we did during the lockdown was for Bumble. And the campaign was called Love Will Find a Way, which was really a toast to the quarantine couples of 2020, who, despite all odds and despite social distancing norms and curfews and everything else, were still finding a way to connect with each other, to feel that rush of endorphins, even in the middle of a raging pandemic, so to speak. Other than that, McDonald's and what we've done with the Equal campaign, for instance, this is an example of how brands they don't need to just say things, they need to do things, and brands of tomorrow will need to prove their purpose. And this actually came from the simple joys of eating a burger, which we simplified with Equal, which is the first of its kind initiative by McDonald's towards inclusivity, where we use a specially designed case that holds the burger together to help people who have limited hand mobility. And even they can enjoy the burger with just as much joy as anybody else. And lastly, I must also talk about what we've done for Royal Challenge and Hotstar, for instance. I think Royal Challenge, the campaign that we did for them, which was in continuation of the idea. Royal Challenge as a brand stands for challenge accepted, in that any challenge that you throw at the brand and its consumers here's a brand that inspires people to take on that challenge. And the campaign that we did for Royal Challenge this time around was We Are Challengers, where we took regular people, COVID heroes, who transformed themselves into such selfless frontline warriors who were winning the battle for humanity. And RCB team, which is the Royal Challenge Bangalore team, proudly donned a tribute jersey with the message "My COVID Heroes" to honor these sacrifices made by these real challengers. And that piece of work, I think, is extremely dear to me. And once again, it's gained a lot of equity for the brand by really showing the conviction in their purpose and giving teeth to what they say.
All right, Amit, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Ankita.
It is time for us to take a short break. On the other side of this break, we are catching up with Atit Mehta, VP and Head of Marketing by Juice, on Network 18's new property, Young Genius.